Welcome to Legal Talks. My name is Gina Girek. I'm on behalf on DeForest. I welcome everyone to tonight's webinar about immigration. This is a very special event. It's the very first event of the series of the Legal Talks. And tonight, we're going to have the topic on doing business in the US. All right. So tonight, the topic is doing business in the US, and we've started this series of events of the Legal Talks in order to bring certain topics closer to our clients, to people that might be interested in these topics. And I have here Rodrigo Marquez Romero from DeForest Querétaro. He's a partner in the law firm in Querétaro. Rodrigo, I know you did your law degree in the Universidad Panamericana in Mexico City. And after that, you studied also in the University of San Diego. So you have also quite some experience on doing business in the US. And just to let everyone know, your practice areas are corporate law, real estate law. You're doing financial, banking, M&A, and foreign investments. So welcome, Rodrigo, and I give you the word for tonight.
No, thank you, Gina. It's a great pleasure to participate in this first of the series of DeForest Legal Talks. I'm here joined by two really resound experts in doing business in the United States, Quentin Wong from the New York desk and Mark Vasquez from the Texas desk of the firm. They both have broad experience in doing business, obviously, in the United States, and they have an international knowledge of how to do business from an inbound perspective and coming from another country to invest and do business in the US. So I'm going to let Quentin and Mark introduce themselves. I don't know, Quentin, if you could start and let us know a little bit of your practice.
Sure. So hi everybody, my name is Quentin and part of New York DeForest desk. So by myself, I spent about 7 years living in New York City, did my undergrad, did my law school degree there. So in terms of being an attorney, before joining DeForest, I practiced mostly private funds law, corporate law, venture capital, private equity funds. So my perspective here about doing business or investing in the US is going to be from a private funds point of view, and could be from a private investment perspective. Mark?
I'd like to thank everybody for being here and welcome. As Rodrigo said, my name is Mark Vasquez, I'm a partner over here at in DeForest, Texas. I have been practicing for over 20 years, and my focus has always been, cross-border business, foreign investment, tax, and corporate law and real estate. And my focus has always been on basically, assisting, whether it's foreign investors coming into the US to invest, whether it's establishing operations or, investing in real estate. That's been my focus. And it's basically just been cross-border. And I studied here in Texas, undergrad and law degrees, and a little bit in Mexico City. And that's where now, it's just my focus is being, an attorney for those individuals and businesses wanting to do business, cross-border. So thank you for being here tonight.
So as we can see, we have two really good experts they're going to help us understand what it implies to do business in the U.S. and how there's a lot of myths and a lot of misunderstandings of foreign people, foreign investors coming into the U.S. So Quentin and Mark are going to help us understand a little bit clearer about this. So I mean, we know that on the age that we're living right now and the disruption that the economic world has experienced through COVID-19 and the introduction of new technologies and and even the introduction of the new USMCA, many companies and individuals and investors have started to look into the United States as a horizon for investing. For our region in Latin America, especially in Mexico, it's very normal and natural to think about investing in the US. However, there's many fears and uncertainties with people and investors when they try to decide what's the best way to move forward and make an investment in the US. And there's a lot of opinions running around in the internet, in magazines and books, and people tend to ask people that have done business in the US before. But it's very important to have expert counsel in this, because in case that we take the first step and start doing things the wrong way, the United States legal system is a very complicated system, and it's a very rigid system for that if you do the things the wrong way. So it is very important to consider all the legal, tax, immigration, and commercial implications that if they're not addressed properly, they could result in a total failure of the venture and to create very complex problems to investors and companies. So that is why, and that's the main objective of this talk, is to walk everybody through that. Everybody that's interested in investing in the US or bringing investments from the US to Mexico and Latin America, and walk them through the ifs and buts of doing business with the United States, and provide this precise and true information related to such an important business decision. So let's get started with the experts and let them guide us through this. The first question for this, for Mark and Quentin, if you want to answer, please just feel free to talk. The first question for this is, in your opinion, what is the most important issue to be solved prior to making the final decision of investing in the United States?
I'll go ahead with, I think like what you mentioned before, there's a big tax issue for foreigners trying to invest in the US. As some of you may know that there's a 30%, there may be a 30% tax withholding on anything that's what we call effective connected income, ECI, connected to any trade or businesses in the US. So that's one of the main concerns. There's a tax issue involved. So thinking as a private funds lawyer, structuring the private funds to avoid taxation is one of the key ingredients in setting up the funds. But that's from a funds perspective. Maybe Mark, you can add on to maybe immigration or any other issues you might think.
Yeah, one of the first things that I always ask with investors or business people wanting to invest in the US is what is their investment perspective? What do they want to invest in? Are they gonna go and invest in real estate? Are they gonna invest as far as in a business? Are they gonna bring their business as a type of branch or subsidiary into the US? First is what type of investment are they making into the US? Because that's gonna dictate always the structure as far as how they're gonna operate that investment, because that structure is going to have implications when it comes to legal protections, legal benefits, and also the tax implications. And it's really important to start at the beginning when it comes to what type of investment they're going to make in the US and how they're going to do business and what type of business, because it always comes into play as far as what's going to be the best tax benefit for them. And the other part to that is not only like what type of investment is from an individual standpoint, a personal standpoint, not necessarily a corporate structure, is what is the investor, in this case the individual investor, are they planning to come to the US to live, or they just want to have their investment here in the US? And that is the important part, because a lot of investors, when they come in, or business people that they want to come and invest in the US or establish operations or buy real estate, part of it is, do they want to be tax residents or not? Because here in the US, we have a tax structure that tries to make everyone a tax resident for US purposes. And usually around the world, the tax residency is only focused on where you're generating income, where you're generating the business. In this case, if you're in Mexico, well, it's just Mexico. But in the US, if you're a tax resident in the US, that means you have to declare, you have to file taxes globally. And that sometimes is a very big disadvantage, because sometimes an investor wants to come to the US and they say, well, I just want to invest. I just want to maybe have a part of my business over here or investments, but I don't want to have to fall under the tax regimen here in the US where I become a tax resident, even though I don't have any immigration status, because many of these folks don't want to come to the US. They just want to invest. And you can do that without having a specific type of immigration status, but even with that, you can still become a tax resident. And that's part of the issues at the beginning that you want to discuss and also understand is, one, what is your goal individually, and also look at the implications, because that could have tax consequences to you, and you may have to start filing taxes in the US when you don't want to file taxes here in the US. And that's at the beginning, that's the two important considerations that we look at when someone wants to invest in the US or establish or do business in the US.
Yeah, Mark, and I think you said something very important, that if you don't do it right from the beginning, you might, I mean, I've experienced with projects and clients that they make wrong decisions because they were not well guided through it, and then it's even harder to amend anything that you did incorrectly, right? So I think, yeah, that's a very good overview on how to invest in the US. The first thing is to make sure that you know what you want, and that kind of guides us to the second item, or the second question for you as US experts, that like we've seen that most people, business people or companies, investors that consider investing in the US, they usually want to invest in real estate related assets, buy properties or buy into rates or similar instruments. Are there any benefits for a foreign investor or foreign business person in the real estate industry in the US?
I think well, a lot of the benefits, because I'm going to talk about the benefits and also the negatives, that sometimes, as you mentioned, if they don't have good counsel at the beginning, what can happen to them. But the benefit is a lot of it is the stability that they have here in the US market when it comes to investment in real estate from a business standpoint. From a legal standpoint, in the US, just in a general rule, anybody can come in and invest in real estate here in the US. There's no restrictions when it comes to that. But you have to do it the right way, and you have to structure it the right way when you come, want to invest in real estate. And before I let Quentin talk more about the fund aspect of it, or how you structure it, because there's various ways that we can structure real estate investments here. But one of the things that I see, and you speak about the negative aspect of it, and when no one gets, or achieves good counsel, is a lot of what I see a lot of times is they come in and they just buy real estate, in their personal name, whether it's residential or commercial. And in that case, they just come because they know that real estate is you can just buy and sell pretty easily here in the US, and you can just invest. So a lot of these investors just come in and just buy real estate in their own personal name, which has a very negative aspect in it, because there's two very key points when it comes to that. One, there's a Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act here in the US, which they called it FIRPTA, and that is set up for specifically foreign investors, because a lot of times in the past, the foreign investors were coming in, buying and selling, and they weren't paying any tax on whether it was on the capital gains or reporting any of it. So they came up with this Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act, that basically what it does is, if you're a foreign investor and you come in and buy property in your personal name, then if you ever decide to sell this property, whenever you decide to sell this property, then the person that's going to buy the property, the person that, when you do the closing, they're supposed to withhold 15% if you're a foreign investor, just 15%. That's not even counting, any other tax, just 15% off the top. because they want you to file a tax return on the sale of that property to determine if you have any gain. And a lot of these investors are shocked at the beginning because they see this 50% withholding that they're getting because of this FIRPTA law, and they're in shock because nobody counsels them in the right way to structure a real estate investment, whether it's the use of any type of corporate structure or trust here in the US to be able to avoid that. And that's only for foreign investors, and that just affects them, so they can, that's not even counting any capital gains or any gains on the property that's been sold. So that's the first thing that has to be, structured properly to avoid that. The other thing and the other issue is the estate tax that we have here in the US. And the estate tax is basically, anything that has to do with, once you pass away and you pass it to your heirs, there's a tax here in the United States on your estate. And we have an estate tax, and that estate tax is 40% of your personal estate. So although we do have some exemptions. This year, the exemption for a U.S. citizen or a green card holder is $11.58 million. So anything below 11.58 million, then you don't have to pay an estate tax on it. Your estate, your family doesn't have to pay. However, for foreigners, for foreign investment, persons that do not have a green card or are U.S. citizens, the exemption is only $60,000. And $60,000, that can mean if you buy property, if you have stock, if you have any type of interest here in the U.S., then they want 40% above the 60% exemption, $60,000 exemption, excuse me. And they want that in 9 months. So that's a very punitive tax for foreign investors, whether it's real estate or stocks. So there's ways you have to structure that to avoid those types of taxes, and there's ways to do it if you're a foreign investor, if you get the right counsel when it comes to establishing a business here, doing business here, or investing in real estate. There's ways to avoid that issue, but those are some of the pitfalls that you run into when you just come in and try to just do it in your personal name.
To piggyback on what Mark said, FIRPTA is a real issue, and one way to get around is to invest in real estate private equity funds, and each fund on their prospectus will indicate on what area they will invest in. For example, in South Carolina or the East, the West. And they will also, on the prospectus, they will say what kind of buildings. It could be residential, office buildings. And those real estate PE funds are structured in a way, without going into so many details, to essentially defeat FIRPTA. So there will be no tax withholding after disposition. So that's one of the advantages of investing in real estate PE, private equity funds.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and it's important to know that, because a lot of people now, and especially now what's going on in the political environment in Mexico and other Latin American countries, that people that have, especially like business people that have the opportunity to even buy just a residence just in case, and they don't know this, and they just go and buy it personally. So it's very important to seek good legal and tax counsel for such purposes. And this also guides us to the other another question, because now you mentioned that it's not a very good idea generally to invest in your personal name. So most of the people that have heard of structures to invest in the US normally ask about incorporating an LLC, and people know that this is fairly easy, and they can even do it over the internet, and just purchasing services from an agent, and they can basically do it without hiring a very high level attorney. But what do you think about that, about people doing this type of practice and just trying to incorporate this sort of vehicles for investing? And if you could explain a little bit about the nature of LLCs versus corporations, and what's mostly recommended in a general perspective for investing in the United States. I don't know, Quentin, if you want to start out with that.
Sure. So an LLC is a limited liability company. It's governed by the operating agreement. So I will go into some of the advantages and disadvantages of the LLC and also the corporation. So I think one of the biggest advantages of having an LLC is that it's flexible. As long as you can draft an operating agreement, you can have it function as you like, function for your business purpose. And I think one of the disadvantages is that for an LLC, it's more difficult to raise capital. I mean, you can structure the LLC in a way that you can, like a corporation, you can issue units, but I think it'll be more difficult because investors and banks are not familiar with the LLC. Going to corporations, I think one of the advantages of corporations is that you can issue stocks, and as a stockholder, you have rights to dividends, you have rights to vote in the corporation, and also you have the right to information. And for me, I think Mark can also add comments if necessary. I think corporation is meant to raise capital. It's easier to raise capital. The banks, investors, they're more familiar with the corporate form. And going to disadvantages, I think corporations definitely have more formalities to keep up with other than LLC. Corporations, you have to have record keeping requirements depending on what state the corporation is. You have to elect officers. So it's, in a sense, it's more record keeping, but all in all, it depends what the investors want to do in the US. And at the same time, you need counsel to have good advice on which of the two you should choose.
And to add to Quintin, that's something that you want to discuss in the beginning. Is what's the long range projections, what's the long range goals. If you do want to raise capital, and you may have to go to a different structure. But if you don't have that goal in mind, because it's a closed business, it's a private business, and it's just going to be a family business, and you're not going to have outside public money as far as shares coming in, then a lot of times you see the LLC as the one that's used regularly because of that, and because it has the flexibility. Because as many of you know, you have a corporation and it has shares, and an LLC is kind of a hybrid between a corporation and a partnership when it comes to tax purposes. It'll give you the corporate protection like a regular U.S. corporation, but at the same time, it gives you flexibility when it comes to tax purposes. So in an LLC, and that's just where I see a lot of issues, and when people just go to just the internet or any type of person that doesn't give good advice when it comes to structuring these LLCs, and they run into problems is the tax aspect of it. Because an LLC, if you have one person that owns the LLC and they do nothing for tax purposes, it's basically a transparent entity. So if a foreign investor comes in and forms their LLC and they don't get good counsel when it comes to their tax implications, and it becomes a transparent entity, then that means that foreign investor will have to file a personal tax return in the U.S. even if they don't want to. And that's a very big issue, because you're losing a lot of benefits when it comes to the tax treaties between the U.S. and other countries. And then even if you have various investors and you come into the U.S. and they just form the LLC just to form it without any tax vision, then they also would have to file basically tax returns if they don't want to file tax returns or become tax residents. So you always have to get good counsel, because the LLC, the flexibility of it is that as an LLC, you can also be taxed as a corporation, as opposed to a transparent entity. It can be non-transparent. It can be a corporation for tax purposes. And a lot of people ask me, well, then why don't we just do a corporation? Why don't we just do a corporation if it's just going to be me and a few investors, and we're not going to decide to go public, and it's so much easier because it's automatically a corporation. And the reason being that you see more of the LLCs, and this is just a nice insider tip, so our audience can have this information, is in the US, stock money is not protected. If you own stock, if you have money in a bank account and you run into a legal issue personally, then here in the US, they can order you to turn over the stock of your corporation. It's not protected. So if you run into a personal issue, that can happen. When it comes to an LLC, an LLC does not have stock. An LLC has either membership interest or units. And since it's a hybrid between a partnership and a corporation, then those membership interests are not readily attached in a sense that anybody can pick them up. The only thing that a person, if a member gets sued personally and has personal liability, they cannot attach those membership interests or units. All they can do is basically get a charging order, which says if you receive any distribution from this LLC, then probably you may have to turn over the money, but they're not going to take away your interest in the business. So that's why you see a lot of the LLCs, because it protects you from the front end. This is like the corporation, but it also protects you as an individual investor, in that knowing that your interest in this LLC is also well protected. So that's some of the the analysis and discussions that we also always have with folks coming in is what are their goals, what's their structure, and how they're going to maintain that, because ultimately you don't want to get into a situation where you just go and you form your LLC without any consideration for all these aspects of legal protection and also tax consequences, and then you run into a situation where then you become in a place that you don't want to be here in the US when it comes to tax purposes.
Okay, that's enlightening also. And also we've seen and there's, I mean, this is just kind of like out there, and people have heard about incorporating their entities. I mean, this is like a very, in the business world, especially in Mexico, when people think of investing in the US, they immediately think, oh, I just need to incorporate an LLC and have it incorporated in the state of Delaware, because that's what I've heard of. And when you ask why, they just don't know why. It's kind of like what people know. And so they just go and try to do that. So is there any implications, or is there really benefit or downside in incorporating your vehicle for investing in the US in a particular state, like in this case Delaware or elsewhere?
I think you're correct, because Delaware is the gold standard in most public companies are incorporated into Delaware, and it's for good reason, because Delaware has a robust judicial system. It has judges that know business law, and is set up, the entire Delaware corporate registry is set up in a way it's very business friendly, I would say. That's why people choose to incorporate in Delaware. But maybe Mark can add what are the other benefits of setting up in other states.
Yeah, and like Quentin, says it really well, is and Rodrigo is like, they hear just Delaware, but to me, I've always told people, why Delaware, and they don't know why. But the reason that a lot of people go to Delaware is because of the history that they have. But really, Delaware is the state that's known for the public corporations, the corporations that have their shares on the stock market, because they have that business friendly state, and they also have a lot of experience when it comes to shareholder litigation in Delaware, because that's where the majority of the companies that are on the stock exchange are. Basically, that's where they have their charter, in Delaware. But for someone that just comes in, has those thoughts of being a public offering or initial public offering or going onto the stock market, a lot of times it just doesn't make sense. There's other states that provide the same type of benefits when it comes to business friendly business laws that are well established, and it also provides the stability of it. And there's a lot of states like that. Texas is one of them, Florida is one of them, Nevada is one of them. That you don't need to go to Delaware, especially if you're not going to be doing any business, because most companies that come in, they don't do business in Delaware. They just establish themselves in Delaware, and they go do business in California and New York, Texas, or Florida. But they're a Delaware entity, whether it's an LLC or a corporation. To me, well, I mean, if the goal is not to be in the stock market, then you don't need to do that. I mean, you're just adding extra costs to maintain your entity in a jurisdiction that you're not really have any connection with, aside from just because you heard that Delaware is the place to go. Because depending if you're doing business in a state that's very business friendly and has the same corporate outlook when it comes to corporate laws, then why would you want to do that? You may just be adding extra cost down the road.
Yeah, and I recently had an experience that in order to get and I don't know if I'm wrong, just correct me. In order to get the tax ID for a client that incorporated a company or an LLC in Delaware, but it was actually, it had the office in Texas. The Texas State Department, I think, or the IRS requested that they had a certificate saying that they were actually going to do business in Texas. So this was something that was a little bit unexpected, and it brought some trouble. I don't know if that's a new thing, or that's just part of something that business people don't know about that.
Yeah, usually what happens is, say in this case you incorporate in Delaware, but you're not going to do business in Delaware. Your business is going to be in Texas, like you're saying. Well, you have to bring that corporation as a foreign corporation into Texas. And it's not meaning a foreign corporation that's from out of the country. It means it's from out of state. Because here in the United States, every state has their own corporate law. It's not at the federal level. It's a state level. So if you incorporate in Delaware, you have to bring that corporation into Texas and saying, I'm going to do business in Texas. This is where I'm going to do business. So I have to register my corporation that's from Delaware as an out-of-state entity, as a foreign entity in Texas. So Texas then can issue its comptroller number and its other types of requirements that you have to comply with, because you're going to be doing business in Texas. So now you're going to have to deal with the Texas aspect of it, because you're doing here, and then you're going to have to deal with the Delaware aspect as well on an annual basis. And sometimes that's just not going to be worth it to anyone, because if you're in Texas, we'll just do it in Texas, because it's going to give you the same benefit as in Delaware, especially if you're not going to go public when it comes to that. So that's one of the things that sometimes that people get surprised at, and I guess you experience that firsthand.
Yeah, and it's not fun for business people to have surprises when they go invest in a foreign country, obviously.
Right.
And now that we were talking about that, there's been, and I mean, this is recent also, but there's a lot of people that are looking to put their money in financial assets out of, in this case, out of Mexico, since the political environment and what we are experiencing here with no economic growth and things related to the energy industry, the clean energy industry that has been overwhelmed with decisions with our federal government of stop providing permits and licenses and all that we've been reading in the news lately. So people look elsewhere, and there's a lot of I think ignorance in foreign investors from a good perspective when they look and they're invited to invest in somehow of a private fund that might be incorporated in the US and invest in financial assets or startups or other assets. So I don't know, Quentin, if you can tell us a little bit about what a foreign investor needs to know prior to making a decision to invest their money in a financial structure or a financial business in the United States.
Sure. So as mentioned throughout this seminar, tax is a big issue, especially U.S. taxation. Most foreign investors would try to escape U.S. taxation if they can. So in terms of structuring a fund to avoid that, we have something called a master feeder structure. So we have two structures, they're called feeders. And for for investors that are subject to U.S. taxation, they invest in the U.S. Usually it's a Delaware partnership. And for foreign investors, you set up another structure, usually in an offshore jurisdiction that's friendly to offshore funds. Could be BVI or the Cayman Islands. So U.S. tax exempt or foreign investors, they invest directly in the offshore jurisdiction. So these two feeder funds, they put the investments together and it funnels through a master structure. The master structure is also incorporated in offshore jurisdiction. So the master structure will invest indirectly on behalf of the foreign investors into the U.S. So in a sense, that would alleviate U.S. taxation issues. So that's the structure typically that we recommend foreign investors investing in funds.
Okay, regarding this type of offshores that you mentioned, if someone wants to incorporate or participate in these types of funds, can everything be done from the U.S.? I mean, from a U.S. office? In this case, for example, from your office, can everything be done from the U.S., or do you actually need to be in the Cayman Islands, or you actually need to be in Jersey or places like this?
Absolutely not. These offshore jurisdictions, Cayman Islands, BVI, they are very adept. They're also like Delaware, they're very business friendly. So as long as you have a contact, say a registered agent, they could help you set up all the fund structures. I've worked mostly with Cayman Islands because it's more, for me, it's more efficient, but you could set up basically everything within 1 or 2 weeks, the offshore structures.
Okay, that's interesting. And well, so far we've talked about like a general overview of incorporating your business in the U.S., about real estate investment and what needs to be taken care of, or at least decided prior to making the decision of incorporating a company. We also have talked about corporate types and corporate structures and jurisdictions within the United States, and now with the offshores. But I'm pretty sure that in the audience there's someone thinking like, is there something, or is there like a structure that can align all the aspects of investing in the U.S.? And I mean, you know, tax, immigration, corporate law, and even legal protection. Do you think there's something that can, or, I mean, is there something like over-the-counter product, or is everything had to be tailor-made for each case? What do you think?
I think everybody also always wants something that just they can get off the shelf, that is just tailored, you know. But here in the U.S., you know, depending on the jurisdictions, depending on your, it's almost like it has to be custom to the person, to the individual, to the investor, because everybody has different goals and everybody has different types of businesses and types of investments that they want to do here in the U.S. So it has to be tailored to that person, to that business, because you know it's different for everybody because of the goals. So it's not, I mean, it's not just one way that's going to fit everybody. I mean, in a general sense, I mean, I can tell you a structure that's really common here, especially when it comes to immigration aspect, because a lot of times, and I'm going to give you like the real world practicality of it that happens, you know. And a lot of times these folks, and I want to speak to Mexico specifically, is they'll come on a B1 or B2 visa, which is the tourist or the commercial visa. And those two visas, I mean, they usually give them a combination. And when you come in, you can do anything with those types of visas. I mean, you can set up your business, you can have meetings, you can meet clients, you can invest in real estate. I mean, you can do anything with that. You just can't work and you just can't live here with those visas. But a lot of folks come in on those visas and they don't leave. You know, they come in because of whatever situation that they're in their country. They come in, they don't leave, and then you know they buy their house, they establish their business, and they put their kids in public schools. You know, and by doing that, you know, you've already closed all the doors here in the U.S. because you already, you know, one, you're buying a property in your own name, which, you know, it's gonna put you in issues with FIRPTA and the estate tax. And then if you, depending on how you structure your business, then, you know, the tax applications of it. And then the immigration part is, then you've basically already violated the immigration laws because you have your kids in the school, you're living here, you don't have any of that status to live here. So basically, it's going to be very difficult, if not almost impossible, to be able to fix your status when it comes to that. And you really close the door and you penalize yourself. But there's other ways to do it, and usually in a general sense, and like I said, everything's is specific to the person, to the investor. But in a general sense, using the tax law, the immigration law, and the legal protection is, you want to have, in this case, you want to have a foreign entity, in this case a Mexican entity, that is the sole owner, the sole shareholder or member of the entity here in the U.S. Okay, you want to have your business that owns the entity here in the U.S. 100%. You don't need a U.S. partner. You don't need anybody from the U.S. to have any interest. The Mexican entity owns 100% of the U.S. entity, and that opens you up to a lot of benefits, because one, you protect yourself from the tax aspect of it, and then you leave the door open to the immigration, because there's various visas that you can use where you have your operations in Mexico. Now you're going to establish operations in the U.S., and you can use the operations in Mexico to establish operations in the U.S. and get a visa by that. And I'm simplifying it in a sense, but that's in a general sense the structure. And then you protect yourself in that way, because if you do it this way, then you not only can get a visa through that company in Mexico establishing operations in the U.S., but you can bring your family as well, and they can get visas and they can be here without any issues. And that's only for the person that wants in the future come to the U.S. A lot of times they don't even want to come. But that same structure, in a general sense, if you have it in place, it's going to allow you to be flexible in the future with whatever you want to do.
Well, that's very interesting. I'm pretty sure that everybody has thought at some point in our lives to live and invest in the U.S., being the largest market still. And it's very interesting to know now that, or have more knowledge and more information about how to make a decision on how to invest in the U.S. So I think we're running out of time. We're running through the end of this talk. It has been very interesting to listen to Quentin and Mark. All their experience and all their knowledge just helps us understand how complex it could be to invest in the United States, but also to understand that there's a way, and there's a lot of ways to do it, and it just depends on having good counsel and timely to avoid making mistakes, and then trying to unmake those mistakes, which is usually harder for business people and for advisors, from a legal, tax, and accounting perspective. So I don't know if you want to make your final remarks on this talk, Quentin, and then Mark, and then we can move on to the questions and answers if there's any.
Sure. Like what Rodrigo and Mark have said, it's important to have good legal counsel at the beginning so you can avoid unnecessary legal costs, especially in regards to private fund formation. A private fund may be the solution for foreign investors invest in the U.S. Without the tax issues such as FERPA or ECI. So I think U.S. we are in the middle of a pandemic, and business sentiment is obviously down. But I think what Rodrigo said, U.S. is still going to be the biggest market for the foreseeable future, and business people or foreign investors looking to invest in the U.S. should have their homework done before making any concrete steps.
I just want to reiterate what Quentin said is the U.S. market and the U.S. legal system and tax system, it's pretty stable, and you can pretty much be able to generally predict what your tax consequences can be, what the legal protection that you need. And as you know, with the change in the tax law, the corporate tax rate is 21%, which is one of the lowest one around the globe. In Mexico it's 35%, here it's 21%. So I mean, it does have a lot of advantages to come into the U.S. and it's very stable as far as the business wise.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that will be interested in investing in the U.S. in the near future, and it was very, very good talking to you guys. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience that need to be addressed. I don't see it. I don't see anything on the platform. But if there's any questions, Gina, just help us and let us know. If not, we can.
No, at the moment, I don't see any questions. It must be that Quentin and Mark just were very, very clear.
We crushed it.
Or we put everybody to
Oh.
sleep. Yeah, too.
Nah,
Someone is asking. Someone I see is asking, is there any chance you can talk again about Canada? So about that, yes. So first of all, this webinar, this particular event was about doing business in the US. And then on the 1st of October, we're going to have a workshop with Rebecca Lenetsky, and it's going to be about obtaining visas for the US. And then on the 8th of October, we're going to have a workshop with a Canadian law firm explaining exactly the visa process for Canada. So make sure you find the right link. It's on the 8th of October. You can also write us an email in case you're not finding how to sign up or register or where and how it is. It's always at 6 p.m. So the workshops are designed that people register, and it's ought to be a more interactive workshop where actually we're going to prepare a couple of scenarios for different visas, and especially giving the current circumstances with the current situation in the world. So that means whatever questions you have beforehand, you might want to send us an email, or to send us an email to legaltalks@deforest.mx, or you can just ask your questions within the workshop, and we hope we can answer all of that. So I think this has been the questions. If you have any other questions, go ahead. The questions are still open. But thank you so much, Rodrigo. Thank you so much, Quentin and Mark. You have been very, very, very explicit, and it was really interesting. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you also for the audience. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us, and then we can maybe connect you with Mark, Quentin, or Rodrigo. And it's been a pleasure having you. And make sure to come back on the 1st of October, the 8th of October, and make sure to see out for future events and future webinars and workshops. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Gina.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye. Good night. Bye.